Good morning, History 101 8-week. Today is the 8th of March. Just heading up the hill towards campus. Sorry if I'm breathing heavy. I did want to give you a few brief thoughts on your Muddiest points for this week. I thought one of the most interesting questions somebody had, and it also represented a number of muddiest points that people brought up. It went like this. So, during this week's reading, I was surprised to find that though Lincoln was in fact anti-slavery, he still did not see African Americans as equals. True. And was actually afraid to integrate freed slaves into society with Americans. Good. I did not understand entirely where Lincoln stood. Did he 100% support abolishing slavery? Or did he truly see the African Americans as people who should be declared freedom and liberty? Excellent question. Especially because, as Americans, we grow up hearing almost from the beginning of our formal education about Abraham Lincoln, what a great president he was, and the role he played in abolishing slavery. Now, I certainly agree that Lincoln is a transformational character, right? Absolutely essential to understanding the history of the United States. But it won't do, as historians at least, to believe in this cartoon image of Abraham Lincoln, because I think as kids we grow up hearing Lincoln freed the slaves, and we think, oh well, if he was an abolitionist then he believed in racial equality, and therefore as soon as he could he ended slavery. Well, that's just not true. I mean, if you say, well, what do you mean Lincoln wasn't an abolitionist? What is this, some kind of history professor interpretation that skews the facts, not telling me the truth? Well, look, don't take my word for it. Read Lincoln, like his own words. He says, I'm not an abolitionist. He was not an abolitionist. He also said he hated slavery. True. Which, right there, that's kind of a conundrum, right? Wait, if you hate slavery, why aren't you an abolitionist? Well, keep in mind what abolitionist meant at the time. It meant that you were committed to the immediate destruction of slavery, no matter where it existed. Abolitionists were a tiny minority of the northern population. All right, they existed, they were influential to a certain degree, but they were by no means a majority of Americans, not even a majority of Northerners. So Lincoln was in this camp of people who said, look, there's something fundamentally wrong with slavery, fundamentally anti-American, anti-democratic. It goes against our values and ideals as Americans, but there's nothing we can do about it because the Constitution of the United States, which we all revere, protects the institution of slavery, right? So Lincoln is very clear about this. Even when he becomes president, he says, look, I will obey the Constitution. And the Constitution of the United States protects slavery, recognizes people as property. Now, you may not agree with this interpretation of the Constitution, but it was certainly widespread during this era, and many people like Lincoln believe this interpretation. So, does that also mean he did not believe in racial equality? He certainly did not believe in racial equality. I mean, if you want to put it in really stark terms, from the perspective of 2023, right? Lincoln was a white supremacist. But all that said, relative to most Northerners, compared to most Northerners, Lincoln was actually fairly progressive on the slavery issue, on the issue of racial equality. What do I mean by that? Well, Lincoln said we can't actually go into the South and take people's slaves away. That would be unconstitutional. But we can do things that will, in the long run, lead to slavery's demise, like not letting slavery expand into the West. Lincoln believed that eventually this would help slavery to die out. Also, although for most of his life he's not what we would call someone who believed in racial equality, when he interacted during the Civil War with probably the most famous African-American abolitionist, Frederick Douglass, Douglass came away from those meetings actually very impressed. He said, Lincoln treated me with respect, he treated me as an equal, and he listened to what I had to say. And I think even more deeply, Lincoln was shook, was moved by the sacrifice of hundreds of thousands of African-American troops during the war who fought for their freedom. And what's remarkable is that by the end of the war, which undermined and ultimately destroyed slavery, right? It wasn't simply Lincoln declaring an emancipation, it's the war that sort of ground slavery to dust. By the end of the war, Lincoln makes this speech where he says, actually, I think, at least for those African Americans who have served our cause as soldiers and those who are, who have distinguished themselves intellectually, we should let them vote. We should give them full equality. And although this may sound halting and limited to our ears, it was actually pretty radical for the time. And here's the crazy part. That was Lincoln's last speech. Why was it his last speech? Because somebody in the crowd heard that speech that night and said, that means black equality. That's what Lincoln is proposing, black equality. That will be the last speech that man ever makes. And it was, because the guy who heard that speech and was so angered by it was named John Wilkes Booth. 2 nights later, he crept into Lincoln's private box at Ford's Theater and assassinated the president.